The chase across frozen worlds, the ice planet Valdris, stretched endlessly before Commander Zara Vex, its crystalline surface reflecting the pale light of 3 distant suns. Her scaled fingers gripped the tracking device as it pulsed with a steady red glow, indicating her target was still moving. 7 days. 7 brutal days she had been hunting this human across one of the most hostile worlds in the galaxy. Zara belonged to the Saurian Empire, a civilization built on strength, honor, and the sacred hunt. Her people had evolved from apex predators, their reptilian forms perfectly adapted for tracking and warfare. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, her muscular frame was covered in natural armor scales that could deflect most energy weapons. Her elongated skull housed enhanced sensory organs that could detect heat signatures from miles away, and her powerful legs could carry her across terrain that would kill most species. The human she hunted was designated as Marcus Chen, an engineer whose exploration vessel had crashed on Valdris during a routine survey mission. According to Saurian intelligence, he was alone, injured, and should have died within hours of the crash. Humans were notoriously fragile, their soft skin and weak bones making them unsuitable for survival in harsh environments. Yet somehow, impossibly, this one had evaded her for an entire week. The crash site lay behind her now, a twisted wreckage of metal and composite materials scattered across a frozen valley. Zara had expected to find a corpse when she arrived, but instead discovered evidence of salvage work. The human had somehow extracted survival gear, emergency rations, and what appeared to be heating elements from the wreckage. More disturbing was the methodical way he had organized the salvage, suggesting clear thinking rather than panic. Her first day of tracking had been routine. The human's heat signature blazed like a beacon in the frozen wasteland, and his footprints were easy to follow in the deep snow. Zara had moved with confidence, certain she would corner her prey before nightfall. But as the triple suns set and Valdris's deadly night cold began to creep across the landscape, something unexpected happened. The human's trail became erratic, then seemed to vanish entirely. Zara had spent hours circling the area where his tracks disappeared, using every hunting technique her people had developed over millennia. She found evidence of disturbed snow, subtle changes in ice formations, and the faintest trace of human scent, but no clear path. It was as if he had learned to hide his passage, adapting to the environment with impossible speed. The second day brought new surprises. Zara discovered that the human had somehow created snowshoes from salvaged materials, allowing him to travel across soft powder that would have trapped most beings. He had also fashioned a makeshift shelter from wreckage and snow, complete with a ventilation system that prevented carbon dioxide poisoning. The engineering was crude but effective, showing an understanding of survival principles that impressed even Zara's warrior mind by the 3rd day. The hunt had become personal. No prey had ever evaded Zara for so long, and her reputation as the Empire's finest tracker was at stake. She pushed harder, moving through blizzards that reduced visibility to mere feet, following traces of scent and heat that existed at the very edge of her sensory capabilities. The human was staying ahead of her, but she could sense his exhaustion in the increasingly desperate nature of his hiding spots. The 4th day brought a revelation that shook Zara's understanding of her prey. She discovered one of his camps and found evidence that he had been watching her. Scratches in the ice showed crude diagrams of her biosuit, with particular attention to the heating systems and joint articulation. The human wasn't just running randomly, he was studying her, learning her capabilities and limitations. On the fifth day, Zara's biosuit began showing the first signs of strain. The heating elements that kept her core temperature stable were working harder against Valdris's brutal cold, and ice was forming along the suit's joints. She had pursued prey across dozens of worlds, but never in conditions this extreme for such an extended period. Her training told her to return to her ship and wait for orbital bombardment clearance, but pride kept her moving forward. The sixth day nearly broke her resolve. A massive ice storm struck the region, creating winds that could freeze exposed flesh in seconds and visibility that dropped to zero. Zara took shelter in a natural cave, expecting the storm to delay her quarry as much as herself. But when the weather cleared, she found fresh tracks leading directly into the storm's path. The human had somehow continued moving through conditions that had stopped a trained Saurian warrior. Now, on the seventh day, Zara felt something she had never experienced during a hunt: doubt. Not just about catching her prey, but about everything she thought she knew about humans and their capabilities. Her biosuit was failing more rapidly now, with ice crystals forming inside the helmet and heating elements cycling constantly to maintain life support. The irony wasn't lost on her that she, the hunter, might die on this frozen world while her prey somehow survived. The tracking device led her into a maze of ice, caves carved by ancient geological processes. The tunnels branched and twisted through the heart of a massive glacier, creating a labyrinth where sound echoed strangely and her enhanced senses became confused by the distorting effects of so much ice. But the device was certain. Her target was somewhere ahead in this crystalline maze. As she moved deeper into the caves, Zara began to notice something odd. The walls showed signs of recent work, subtle modifications that improved airflow and reduced dangerous ice formations. Someone had been making these tunnels safer and more habitable. The engineering was sophisticated, showing an understanding of ice dynamics that took years to master. The sound reached her first, a rhythmic tapping that echoed through the tunnels like a distant heartbeat. Zara followed the noise, her weapon ready but her curiosity overriding her killer instincts. The tapping grew louder as she approached what appeared to be a larger chamber ahead, and with it came something else, the unmistakable scent of human activity. She rounded a corner and stopped dead in her tracks. The chamber opened before her like a cathedral of ice, its walls polished smooth and gleaming in the light from her biosuit. At the center sat Marcus Chen, but he wasn't cowering or preparing weapons as she had expected. Instead, he was working methodically on something spread across the cave floor. Marcus looked up as she entered, showing no surprise at her arrival. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 30 standard years, with dark hair and intelligent eyes that held no fear. His survival gear was a patchwork of salvaged materials and improvised solutions, but it was clearly effective. Most surprising of all, he appeared to be in relatively good health despite a week of survival in one of the galaxy's most hostile environments. But it was his project that captured Zara's attention and held it. Spread across the cave floor was what could only be described as a thermal suit, but unlike anything in her experience. The base layer appeared to be woven from salvaged insulation materials, creating a flexible fabric that retained heat while allowing movement. Over this were carefully placed heating elements, scavenged from his crashed ship and rewired into an efficient power distribution system. The suit was clearly sized for someone much larger than Marcus, someone with proportions that matched a Saurian warrior. As the implications sank in, Zara felt her grip on her weapon loosen. The human hadn't just been running from her, he had been preparing for her arrival. Every day of the chase, Every clever evasion and survival technique had been leading to this moment. Marcus returned to his work without speaking, his hands moving with practiced precision as he sealed the final connections on the suit's power system. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of his tools and the distant howl of wind through the cave system. Zara found herself studying his movements, noting the efficiency and care he put into every detail. Finally, Marcus set down his tools and looked at her directly. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and steady despite the circumstances. He had known she was close, had been expecting her for hours. The suit was finished now, designed specifically for her biosuit's power requirements and her species' physiological needs. Zara stared at the thermal gear, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. In 7 days of pursuit across a frozen wasteland, while she had been hunting him with the intent to kill, this human had been crafting something to keep her alive. The gesture was so far outside her understanding of predator and prey relationships that she felt something fundamental shift in her worldview. The implications were staggering. Marcus had studied her, learned her weaknesses, and instead of exploiting them, had worked to address them. While she had been focused on the hunt, he had been focused on survival for both of them. It was a level of strategic thinking and compassion that challenged everything. The Saurian Empire taught about human capabilities. As Zara lowered her weapon completely, she realized that the hunt was over, but not in the way either of them had expected. In this ice cathedral, surrounded by the evidence of human ingenuity and compassion, she was about to learn that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from defeating your enemy, but from discovering they were never your enemy at all. The warmth of understanding. The silence in the ice chamber stretched like a taut wire between predator and prey, though Zara was no longer certain which of them was which. Marcus continued working on the thermal suit with methodical precision, occasionally glancing at her weapon but showing no fear of the plasma cannon that could vaporize him in an instant. His calm acceptance of her presence was perhaps more unnerving than if he had begged for mercy or tried to fight. Zara's training screamed at her to complete the hunt, to fulfill her mission and eliminate the human threat. But her logical mind was processing information that challenged every assumption about human capabilities. The suit before her represented hours of careful engineering work, performed under conditions that should have killed any human within the first day. More puzzling was the obvious care taken to match the suit to her specific physiological requirements. Why? The word escaped her lips as barely a whisper, but in the crystalline chamber it echoed like thunder. Marcus looked up from his work, his dark eyes meeting her reptilian gaze without flinching. For a moment, neither of them spoke, to beings from different worlds, trying to bridge a gap that seemed impossible to cross. Marcus set down his tools and leaned back against the ice wall, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a warmth that seemed to push back against the deadly cold surrounding them. He told her about his grandmother, Alina Chen, who had taught him that survival wasn't just about staying alive yourself, but about making sure others could survive too. Alina had lived through the colony wars, Marcus explained, watching entire settlements destroyed by conflicts between species who refused to understand each other. She had seen friends die not from enemy weapons, but from preventable cold and hunger while trapped in bunkers. From those experiences, she had developed a simple philosophy: when someone is cold, you make them warm, even if they started as your enemy. As a child, Marcus had watched his grandmother work late into the night, crafting insulated clothing for refugees who arrived at their colony with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Some were human, some were from species that had been at war with humanity just years before. Alina never asked about their origins or their past actions. She simply saw beings who were cold and made them warm. The lesson had seemed naive to young Marcus, especially as he grew older and learned about the realities of interstellar conflict. During his engineering training, instructors emphasized efficiency and resource management. Helping your enemies was presented as a waste of materials that could better serve your own people. But now, trapped on this frozen world with a warrior sent to kill him, his grandmother's wisdom suddenly made perfect sense. Zara listened to his story with growing confusion and something else she couldn't identify. In Saurian culture, strength was measured by one's ability to defeat enemies and claim territory. The concept of helping someone who meant you harm was not just foreign, it was actively discouraged as a sign of weakness. Yet this human had demonstrated remarkable strength in evading her for 7 days while simultaneously working to ensure her survival. Marcus stood and gestured toward the thermal suit with obvious pride in his craftsmanship. He had spent the first 3 days of the chase studying her biosuit's design, identifying its weaknesses and failure points. The heating system was efficient, but had never been designed for extended operation in Valdris's extreme environment. The joints were vulnerable to ice formation that could lock up the articulation systems. Most critically, the power distribution was uneven, leaving her extremities vulnerable to frostbite. The suit he had created addressed each of these problems systematically. The base layer would prevent ice formation while improving heat retention. The supplementary heating elements would boost her biosuit's flagging systems. Most ingeniously, he had created a power management system that would extend her suit's operational time by nearly 40%. It was engineering born of compassion, but executed with precision that any Saurian technician would admire. Asterisk, as Marcus explained the suit's features, Zara became aware of her own body's distress signals. Her biosuit's heating system was cycling constantly now, struggling to maintain her core temperature. Ice crystals had formed throughout the suit's interior, making movement increasingly difficult. Without intervention, she would likely survive another day at most before her systems failed completely. The human was offering her life, freely given despite knowing she had come to kill him. The gesture was so unprecedented in Zara's experience that she struggled to find an appropriate response. In Saurian culture, debts of honor were sacred, but this transcended mere debt. This was an act of pure compassion that demanded nothing in return. Marcus seemed to sense her internal struggle. He explained that he had activated a rescue beacon 3 days ago, broadcasting on both human and Saurian frequencies. Help would come eventually, but survival until that moment required cooperation rather than conflict. He had enough emergency rations and heating fuel to sustain them both if they worked together, but not if they remained enemies. The practical nature of his argument appealed to Zara's warrior training, but it was the underlying message that truly moved her. Marcus wasn't asking her to abandon her mission or betray her people. He was simply suggesting that survival took precedence over everything else, and that survival was easier when shared. It was a human perspective on strength that she had never encountered before. A distant, rumbling sound interrupted their conversation, vibrating through the ice chamber with ominous intensity. Marcus's expression immediately became serious as he recognized the sound of an approaching ice storm, far more severe than the weather they had experienced during the chase. Such storms on Valdris could last for days and brought temperatures that would kill even protected individuals if they were caught in the open. Without hesitation, Marcus began activating heating elements throughout the chamber while gesturing for Zara to put on the thermal suit. His movements were urgent but controlled, showing the kind of calm efficiency that came from extensive survival training. As the storms advanced, winds began howling through the cave system. He explained that they had perhaps 20 minutes before the chamber became uninhabitable without additional protection. Zara found herself moving to comply with his instructions, her warrior instincts recognizing competent leadership when she saw it. The thermal suit fit perfectly over her biosuit, its heating elements immediately providing relief to her overworked systems. As warmth began spreading through her extremities for the first time in days, she realized just how close to system failure she had actually been. Working together, they sealed the chamber's entrances with salvaged materials and ice, creating a barrier against the storm's deadly winds. Marcus showed Zara how to monitor the heating elements and manage their power consumption to ensure they lasted through the duration of the storm. His teaching was patient and thorough, treating her as a partner rather than a captured enemy. As the storm reached full intensity outside their shelter, the two unlikely companions found themselves dependent on each other in the most fundamental way possible. Zara's biosuit provided lighting and additional power for their systems, while Marcus's engineering expertise kept their improvised shelter functioning. Neither could survive alone, but together they had created a small pocket of safety in a hostile universe. During the long hours of the storm, they talked about their respective cultures and the war that had brought them into conflict. Zara learned about human colonies where different species worked together on terraforming projects, while Marcus heard about Saurian honor codes that emphasized protecting the weak and respecting worthy opponents. They discovered that their peoples had more in common than their governments wanted to admit. When the storm finally passed and rescue ships arrived, broadcasting on multiple frequencies, Zara faced a choice that would define the rest of her life. She could complete her mission and claim a kill that would advance her career, or she could report that her quarry had died in the storm while she barely survived. Marcus made no attempt to influence her decision, simply gathering his gear and preparing to face whatever consequences awaited. As they prepared to leave their ice shelter, Zara looked at the thermal suit that had saved her life and realized that she had been given a gift, far more valuable than mere survival. She had learned that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the greatest victory was achieved not through conquest, but through understanding. In saving her life, Marcus Chen had taught her that enemies could become allies when compassion replaced fear. The rescue ships touched down on Valdris's surface just as the triple suns emerged from behind the storm clouds, painting the ice fields in shades of gold and amber. As they walked together towards salvation, Zara made her decision. She would report that her quarry had escaped, lost in the storm that had nearly claimed them both. It was a lie that served a greater truth about the possibility of peace between their species. In her report, she would recommend that future contact with humans be handled through diplomatic rather than military channels. Some enemies, she had learned, were only enemies because no one had tried to make them friends, and sometimes, in the coldest places in the universe, the warmth of human compassion could melt even the hardest warrior's heart.